Welcome to the second part of a second century of photography. Hope you'll enjoy the video. Yeah, let's jump right in. In 1934, the 135 film cartridge was introduced, which is this metal can thingy, which we still use till this day, and it made film really easy to use. Year later, in 1935, Kodachrome was introduced, which was first color film, first only 16 millimeters, but a year later, 8 and 35 millimeters were introduced as well. And it was so good, and the technology was so good that it was used both for movies and pictures. And it was first commercially successful color film and probably most popular too, because like you can still buy it. 1936, IHG Kamerawerk introduced the Kine Exacta, first 35 millimeters SLR camera. SLR stands for single lens reflex. And Germany was busy that year because the same year we got Agfa Color, which was a series of colored photography products from Agfa, like films, sheets, slides, whatever you like, for pictures and motion pictures. Let's move out from Germany for a little, especially for that year, because in 1939, the Viewmaster 3D was introduced. That was basically like colored 3D pictures using Kodachrome. And you've probably had this thing as a kid, because it's a toy that's almost like 100 years old at this point. And I'm pretty dang sure you had one of these. 3 years later, in 1942, Kodacolor releases the first film that provides the possibility of making chromogene colored prints on paper, which were basically colored pictures on paper. Okay, so I didn't really explain quite well what chromogenic photography is, so I'm just gonna sum it up like that. So chromogenic photography, first let's start with what chromogen is. Chromogen is basically something that doesn't have color, but it can be processed to be colored. So in here, similarly to most processes, we use silver halidite as an emulsion to get the image. And as we know, silver halidite is black and white. But there are also three layers that are usually sensitive to red, green, and blue colored light. Some of them require C41 developing technique. So yeah, it's basically layers of dye and just layer of silver as you would go about it. But yeah, that's pretty much how even modern films work. So there's that. Let's go back to the video. In 1947, holography was invented. And yeah, it's basically like a hologram. Uses some mirrors and wavelengths and shit. I don't know, I'm too stupid to understand that. And it scans the object from two sides. But yeah, what the fuck? We figured out holograms by 1940s. Why we don't have holograms right now? Like, I know we do, but why we don't have them commercialized? But that was, I guess, more of a novelty than anything else. Or maybe it was more scientific than anything else. But in terms of scientific things, the same year, Rapatronic camera was introduced, which basically is like a high-speed camera with the speed up to 10 nanoseconds. I think it was developed by US government to take pictures of nuclear explosions and shit, but still really fucking cool. 1948, Hasselblad camera is introduced, which is probably responsible for like the most popular / important pictures in the human history, like the blue ball. Because Hasselblad is not cheap, and it's used by NASA, it's used by prestige photographers. And yeah, did I mention it's not cheap? But everyone that's into photography knows Hasselblad. Every one of you wants to own one of them, if you already don't. But that's the camera for pros. For all of you normies, you're probably more interested in the other invention from that year, which was created by Edwin Land, and it's a little thing called Polaroid Instant Camera. You might heard of that. A year later, the Contex S camera, which was first 35mm SLR camera that used pentaprism in the viewfinder. It's basically like a piece of glass that allows you to see what your lens sees precisely. So yeah, you won't have the parallax effect, which is your picture will be different from the viewfinder by a few millimeters. And by the 1950s, photography was wildly popular and easy to get. We started to create some categories of photography, and some of them started to gain traction and recognition they have today. Like, for example, photojournalism, fashion photography, advertisement, and more. Basically, most of the categories of photography we have today come from around 1900s to 1950s, professional photography types. But why everything's black and white if we figure out color film? Well, the black and white is still way cheaper than color, which is quite expensive. That's why no one uses it. 1957, first Asahi Pentax SLR was introduced, and this Pentax design revolutionized the camera build and changed how we build cameras forever. And also, if you're into film photography, Pentax is always a really good option. Also, in the same year, we've got first digital image scanner that get images into a computer. What about more of a artistic view of photography? Don't worry about that. 1959, the chemigram gets defined by Pierre Cordier. So basically, this is like an art piece that is created by properly developing a picture in a darkroom, then taking it outside and painting it with the chemicals again. And it's done mostly on paper, of course, with silver halides. And also people were doing it since 18th century, but I guess they named it later. 59, Nikon F camera was introduced with F mount, which is still used today. And I also wanted to mention when Canon did their a universal mount, but they didn't. Like, they make a new mount each decade. What's up with that? Also on 59, Agfa, first fully automatic camera, Optima. It still had manual focusing though, but the exposure was auto-generated, and it generated the voltage related to the luminosity around to measure the light and set the exposure, because the voltage directly related to the exposure of the picture, which I cannot wrap my hand around this. It seems like a black magic. Like, how the fuck? You read luminosity, you create equal amount of electricity, and then your camera corresponds to that amount of electricity generated through exact exposure. 1959, everybody. But I guess a decade later, they sent man on the moon, so fine, let's give them that. In 1963, Instamatic Kodak was released, which was first cheap, shitty camera you could get, also called point and shoot. It was just basically a plastic junk, but it was like the cheapest. And yeah, that concludes the second part of the second century of photography. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you did, you can leave a like, type a comment, or subscribe, or all of the above. Stay tuned for the third part. It's coming out soon. If it's out yet, go and watch it. And if you didn't watch the first video somehow, like, the f are you doing here? Just go and watch the first part as well. Alright, bye!